Hello and greetings again, and we're here to share another Bible lesson, or at least part of the discussion we had with the Bible study this morning. And one of the things that I've noticed as I've looked at these is that for all of you out there, what you can see is by staring in behind me, by staring at the water, and probably wondering what that means. But the first part you never get to see because it's up above our heads. But it says you can't cross the sea by staring at the water. And so that's what's up there. If any of you are curious as you're looking at these videos, that's what it is. But we had a Bible study this morning, and the focus was, at least the starting point was Numbers 16, and a parsha, or a portion of the Bible that's often referred to as Korach and the rebellion. And in order to introduce the topic, we had kind of an unusual surprise introduction, in that we had come across a book that really helped to...
Commentaries are good.
Yeah, and sometimes authors have a good way of putting things to really get to the point across. And so Janine came across this book that really does just that.
The commentary is, Who Wet My Pants? Okay? Or what I call a rebellious person who doesn't want to take personal responsibility. Yeah. So this book is fabulous for that. Who wet my pants? The poor guy goes to this whole entire adventure with his friends, so-called friends, saying, who wet my pants? Because certainly he didn't wet his pants. He couldn't have wet his pants. And then he comes to the conclusion, they all wet his pants. And when that didn't work,
so they must have all,
when they didn't
they were
come
all
clean,
in on it.
Yep. Then he decided that his pants were broken.
I think that's the part I like the most, is that he finally gets to the point where he realizes the friends weren't around him. They couldn't possibly be responsible, but he still doesn't come clean.
Nope, he still doesn't come clean. He decides that his pants are broken because he really does like his friends, supposedly because he bought donuts for them. And then he wanted to eat his donuts, and he wanted everybody to eat their donuts too. So he decided to forgive them.
Yes, how big of him.
For wetting his pants when his pants were broken. So when we talked about the sons of Korach today, it was so interesting because you have a whole people group. And here's what I want to do before we even get into a people group or a political group that does this kind of thing, is do this. Have you ever decided you wanted to get away with something and didn't want to take responsibility for it? And I can guarantee you all of us have done it. So I don't want to be pointing fingers today as much as I want to laugh at it, because it is kind of funny when we do that. But there comes a point where God says it's not funny anymore, and we need to deal with it. And that's what happens with the sons of Korah.
And it really takes it really is difficult at times for a person to admit, as you get into a difficult time and as you look back and say, did I walk myself into this situation? Am I facing the consequences of what I have done? And am I, that sort of thing. And sometimes it does take some serious reflection.
And we thought today that we would bring out the words humility, and also along with personal responsibility, purpose. And do you really love your purpose? Are you happy with what God is saying your purpose is? Or are you just going ahead and doing your own purpose and not recognizing what God has? Or if God puts you in something and you recognize it and you say, you know what, that's not enough. I want more. I want to be bigger. I want to be better. I want to be something else besides God's purpose, because I don't necessarily see the result of it right now. And I want to see the results right now. Otherwise, I don't feel valuable. And so we have a lot of these situations in Numbers that come up with these patriarchs and the political system of the time, the religious system of the time, whatever you want to call it.
And does Satan use those seeds of discontent, twist them in order to get you involved in something far worse than, and so it goes. And so we're going to start reading from Numbers 16, and I'm just going to read through this. Really, it's kind of an introduction, because a lot of this story about the rebellion of Korach focuses on the dramatic showdown, the dramatic ending. We're not going to focus on that. Instead, we're going to talk about How did we get there? How did this happen? And so starting with verse 1, now Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahat, the son of Levi, along with Datan and Abiram, the sons of Eliav, and On, the son of Pelet, descendants of Reuben, took men and rebelled against Moshe. Siding with them were 250 men of Israel, leaders of the community, key members of the council, men of reputation. The Hebrew says Nisi, they were like princes of the tribes. They assembled themselves against Moshe and Aharon and said to them, will you take too much on yourselves? After all, the entire community is holy, every one of them, and Adonai is among them. So why do you lift yourselves above all of Adonai's assembly? When Moshe heard this, he fell on his face. Then he said to Korach and his whole group, in the morning Adonai will show you who is his and who is holy person he will allow to approach him. Yes, he will bring whomever he chooses near to himself. Do this. Take censers, Korach, and all your group. Put fire in them and put incense in them before Adonai tomorrow. The one whom Adonai chooses will be the one who is holy. It is you, you sons of Levi, who are taking too much on yourselves. Then Moshe said to Korach, listen here, you sons of Levi. Is it for you a mere trifle that the God of Israel has separated you from the community of Israel to bring you close to him, so that you can do the work in the tabernacle of Adonai and stand before the community serving them? And to remember again, what their duty was, is that we would say, depending on how you look at it, they were the ones who were allowed to come close to the holy articles. Their job was to transport them as the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was being moved. They, as you recall, the Ark of the Covenant, to touch the Ark of the Covenant, as we found out as David was moving it, the wrong person would die. It is said that Korach is one of the four who would carry the Ark of the Covenant. We would look at that and say, that's amazing. That's an amazing responsibility, amazing job title, if you will. But Moshe is asking me, are you saying that's not enough? And the answer was that apparently it was not. He has brought you close, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. Now you want the office of Kohen too. And so we understand what's really at stake here. He wants to be the high priest. He wants to take Aharon's position. That's why you and your group have gathered together against Adonai. After all, what is Aharon that you complain against him? Well, he's the Kohen Hagadol. That's what he is. He's the high priest. Then Moshe sent to summon Datan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but who replied, we won't come up. They didn't even want to talk about it. Is it such a mere trifle bringing us up from the land of flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert? Now this is Datan and Abiram hitting this, and it just floors me to read that they're stating that Moshe has brought them from the land flowing with milk and honey to kill them in the desert.
So what we want to do is give you some principles. When you read this, be sure you understand God's character before you read it. God's character is what? God's character is good. He's not going to lie. He's not going to hide anything. This got completely twisted. This group of people is not remembering. Nobody forced anybody to come out of Egypt. This was volunteer, completely volunteer. You want to live? Go in the house at Passover, put the blood on your doorposts, and make sure that you stay in there. And then you're going to leave in the morning. Nobody said you had to leave in the morning. Nobody had a plowshare or anything they were doing to hold anybody. Nobody was dragging anybody out with ropes. This was a voluntary situation, and we talked about it as well. Is that what did they leave? You just had 10 huge destructive plagues wipe out the majority of Egypt. Sure, it was still going to be a place to live, but you had to repair, you would have had to regrow, you would have had to breed your stock that's left. And I mean, this is going to take years. They had nothing when these people left, and it's a land of milk and honey. And so what's the perspective here? So as you're reading it, try to remember that it's our job to search these little details out. It is the honor of kings to search out these matters. So as you're reading it, you're like, oh yeah, that's what they left. No, it's like reading a political article of today. did you really search out the matter? Did you really understand who said what? Did you really understand why? And it's your job to go and search that out. So we want to make sure we start with that.
And tied in directly with that is this idea that this can be misconstrued to say you don't question somebody who's in authority. And that is not what's happening here. This is a rebellion.
Moses didn't say, "Don't question me."
This is a
He
rebellion.
fell on his face.
And part of the rebellion is that this is dishonest. They were not in a land flowing with milk and honey. They were slaves. What a preposterous thing to propose. But that is what happens when people's minds have been poisoned to try to justify. You sometimes, we instinctively don't want to do certain things, and so Satan will twist things and to try to poison us to get us to the point that we can justify in our mind why the thing that we instinctively know is wrong is suddenly right.
And I think when we read this, another great way to read it is, how does it transpose to my world today? And I'm sorry, but we can see this particular thing going on in our political system today. So it does relate. It relates to us all the time in what we're up against, in how news is given to us, how much truth is in the news, and where do you find the truth, and what do you do? And researching is really, really important.
So let's go through some of the intellectual acrobatics that these characters that have been introduced so far go through in order to justify this rebellion. And one of them, the first one, the leader, Korach, that's the one that's interesting. Korach's name, as an adjective, the word comes from a word that means baldness. As a verb, it means to uproot or supplant. And so the idea is the baldness is like, picture a hill, and it's not necessarily talking about a man's baldness of the head, but think in terms of a hill and beautiful trees that have been uprooted, and we call it a bald hill. And that's the sort of thing. So that's the sort of baldness. So he comes from, his very name means to uproot and to cause this turmoil. But beside that, where did he get to the idea that suddenly this was important to him? He was from the tribe of Kohath, and so was Aharon and Moshe. Their oldest son of Kohath, out of the descendants of Levi, was Amram, and so Aharon is from that tribe. That would be the oldest. Aharon is the oldest of that line, and so in the ancient times that would be thought of as the person who was naturally in charge. And Korach apparently was okay with that. Next in line in that family of Amram and Itzar, as we find out, Korach was the descendant of Itzar. So he would be second. That would mean that in his mind, he would be like second under Aharon. However, Moshe had given him the responsibility of these articles of the tabernacle, very important work, I would say, in my opinion, that's amazing responsibility, but he had given the tribal leadership to one of the younger sons of the Kohath, Uziel's descendant, Elisaphan. So Elisaphan becomes the leader of the Kohath tribe rather than Korach. In Korach's mind, well, that means that it does away with this whole oldest sort of thing, which means that Aharon is no longer legitimately the high priest. It's up for grabs in a sense, because we're doing away with the old patriarch system. Well, it was never the old patriarch system. It was Moshe being instructed from God to do the things he was doing, and Korach using this little bit of mental acrobatics to justify his rebellion.
So I think in a way to just make this a shorter program for you, because you can read this and you can study it out, is to say Korach was not happy being who he was to be. It wasn't enough for him, and he thought he was better than. And we as people really need to think about being happy in the position and the place that God puts us. So knowing your purpose,
yes,
and being happy in that purpose. And if there's something that you need to do to make your purpose, like if God gave you a skill, yeah, you need to hone out that skill. That's a good thing. But if he puts you in a place and you want to usurp that authority, we might have a problem.
Yes.
And so being careful to know those things.
And that there are seasons and times and different things
Mm-hmm.
in the reality we live in. There's used to be a garden thing that I've seen before that says bloom where you're planted, and you, for the moment that you're planted where you are, you can prosper in the spiritual sense. But Korach was not the only one who had this way of this mental acrobatics to get to where he was. It was also these Reubenites, these members of the tribe. Why were they involved? Well, when you stop and think about it, why would the tribe of Reuben? Why would leaders in the tribe of Reuben? And I know there's some stories about these particular individuals, but stop and think also that the tribe of Reuben, what is their story? Well, they are the oldest, considering Reuben was the firstborn, and Judah, the tribe of Judah, had in a sense taken their place as the leader of the nation. They were the ones that went first, and Reuben and others were to the south of the tabernacle, so on and so forth. And so they have a beef too that, hey, why aren't we the first? Why aren't we at the top? Why is the tribe of Judah above us? And so they have a reason to be involved in this rebellion. And then we have the 250 princes, the 250 Nisi. What was their thing? And you'd say, well, this is where the who wet my pants story comes in. They had just gone through the whole debacle with the spies, and they were the ones who understand that the spies came back. Well, who conveyed this message to the people, and who was it that made the decisions that took place? Well, it would be their leaders, because there are too many people. You know, they didn't have electronic voting and such things then. It had to be word of mouth carried out to the people. And so these leaders are the ones who would have conveyed this information to the people. They're the ones who would have made the decision, no, we're not going forward. And then when they heard the punishment, okay, we are going forward, and we're routed. They are the ones who got them to the point where they are right now. And so they had a choice to make. Do we accept the punishment and convey to the people that we have sinned a great sin and we will be punished for it, so on and so forth? Or do they say, not me, it was that leader's fault, he must have done it, because things aren't going well. And so that's where the storybook, Who Wet My Pants, seemed to come in, because that is, sadly, and as Janine had mentioned earlier, we can be caught in that trap ourselves, in not taking responsibility for something that actually we do have responsibility, at least a part in, and not being able to, in conflicts, in relationship conflicts, it's important that we be able to be honest enough that if we have played a role, that we can be honest with ourselves and say, you know, we played a role in this conflict. And that's hard to do sometimes. It's hard not to just blame the other person and say, you know, it's all their fault. Seldom, it's possible, but seldom is it all their fault. But anyway.
In our case, it's always your fault.
Yes, so it is possible. I put it out, it is possible, yes.
He wet my pants.
So this was a rebellion. They were not honest about the reason for their rebellion, because Korach actually wanted to be the high priest, and he was not saying that. Instead, he was talking to the people and saying, well, we're all important people. And well, it wasn't the real reason that he was not honest. That wasn't the real reason that he had started this rebellion. He started it behind the scenes, gathering dissent and spreading dissent in order to do this. That's another sign that it's a rebellion. And third, he was not honest about what he wanted to achieve out of it, which was to be the high priest. And so that could not end well, and it did not. But this whole idea of not being satisfied with the purpose brought us to the book of Acts in chapter 6, actually 6, 7, and 8.
And the short story of that one, because the short story is that two waiters end up changing the course of many's histories and bringing many to the Lord, because they were okay with what they were. Because it wasn't about being a waiter, it was about serving God, and it didn't matter.
Yeah, can you imagine?
It didn't matter that they were waiters.
Well, and we'll just read the words, just two verses, chapter 6, 1 and 2. Be careful. Oops, I'm in Matthew. No wonder that didn't look right. Here we are. Here's chapter 6. Around this time, when the number of disciples was growing, the Greek-speaking Jews began complaining against those who spoke Hebrew that their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution. So the 12 called a general meeting of the disciples and said, "It isn't appropriate that we should neglect the word of God in order to serve tables." So they'd said, "Choose 7 men among you, full of the Spirit and wisdom, to serve tables." Well, who were the first 2 in that list? It was Stephen and Philip. And so the rest of chapter 6, all of chapter 7 is devoted to Stephen and the profound impact that he had in that community. And then his martyrdom, and the amazing grace and humility, even in dying, that he had, that in his last words, he asked that God not hold this death, this stoning against those who were there. And who was there? The next verse mentions that Paul was there, and God was merciful, granted that prayer not to hold it against Paul, and Paul became, of course, this incredible missionary, and so on and so forth. But not to forget Philip, who went to the land of Samaria, and faith in Messiah broke out there, and miracles were taking place. All of these things are happening. He goes through that, and then he's told by the Holy Spirit to go in a different direction, and meets the Ethiopian, and has this conversation with the Ethiopian, and there are those who credit that encounter with Philip for the Christian community and the Messianic Jewish community in Ethiopia today, and the surrounding nations around there, this whole outreach. And you'd say, as Janine said, 2 table waiters at least
Change the world.
Change the world, yeah. At least as we would,
and I think part of that is a perspective look. So I can either be a professional ball player, or I can be someone who's serving the Lord, and it happens to be that I, as a profession to feed my family, I play ball, but I serve the Lord. And so I think we can all identify with, don't call yourself a thing that does this job. This is my job. Well, yeah, it's your job, but what is first? What is first? What is first? My first thing is, I'm going to serve the Lord, and whatever I do, I'm going to give him glory. And that's first.
And the significance of what you do is not defined by a title or the way the world views it.
Mm-hmm.
God decides what its significance is, and only He can see how it fits into His plan.
Mm-hmm.
In this desire of ours, this prayer of ours, that His kingdom come and His will be done, and He sees the whole. We see just our part.
And the heart.
And He sees the heart.
Yeah.
And so we
hope you see your heart.
And to recognize that wherever you are at the moment, and it changes. We're moved to different places, different things happen, but wherever you are, there is purpose, and to seize that and do what God has called you to do, be who He's called you to be, and He is the one who decides the significance of that. He makes it important. He makes you important. He makes us important, and that's where our purpose and value comes from, because it's durable and will last.
So we hope that you have a great day.
Shalom to all of you.
Shalom.